This is WOMMLP operating out of Burlington, Vermont, 105.9 The Radiator. Good evening, it is the Rocket Shop once again. I am your host, Tom Proctor, and with me tonight, a big heavy world favourite, Rik Palieri. How's it going?
It's doing okay, Tom. It's great to be out in the world again. I mean, this is the first time, Tom, that I've been, since maybe last summer I did something, but it's been very, I've been very cautious. And so now that we can all gather together in a safe way, I'm really glad to have this kind of opportunity right here at Big Heavy World, to come back and to share music and some stories together with you, Tom.
Well, I'm happy you're in. I always know you're a great storyteller. I'm looking forward to this interview. You've always got a yarn to spin. We always like kicking it off with the song, though, Rik. So what have you got for us?
Well, I thought I would just, when the pandemic started, Jim Lockridge asked me if I would be able to do something at the Radiator to kind of calm people down a little bit, So I started doing this hard-hitting songs and stories for hard-hitting times, and every Tuesday, it's been really wonderful, a very healing kind of thing. And I always started with this little song. I'm remembering the days before I went away, way back in the hills of old Vermont. And the orchard on the hill, I think I see it still, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Oh, tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun, near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Now there used to be a barn near the old fishing pond, way back in the hills of old Vermont. So many fields of hay now gone with yesterday, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun, near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Well, everything has changed, nothing stays the same, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Like the old brown panther's roar, you won't hear that no more, way back in the hills of old Vermont. Tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun, near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom, way back in the hills of old Vermont. But when the rains came down and flooded many towns, way back in the hills of old Vermont, all the neighbors lent a hand for the loving of the land, way back in the hills of old Vermont. For tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun, near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom, way back in the hills of old Vermont.
All right, Rik Palieri serenading us on the way into this interview tonight. Lovely song. I think very apt for the kind of time of year we're in.
Oh, yeah. And, the cool thing is, Tom, when I'm at home and late at night, I can sit out on the deck and I hear the loons over from Lake Iroquois. And when I wrote the song, there weren't loons there. so it's pretty cool that actually where I'm living is sort of like manifested into my ideal of what this life is all about. And, it's been sort of an interesting time during this pandemic because you thought a lot about all the years that you've been away. I mean, I've been living in Vermont now for 41 years. And I spent 10 years over in Springfield, Vermont. And most of the time I've been here. But I would travel so much. I'd be out on the road. I'd go out sometimes 6 months. And that wasn't very uncommon for me to go that long. And so it's really interesting to actually be here in Vermont for all this time and realize how beautiful it is and how great it is to be living somewhere that you really enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reason why a lot of people are flocking to the state right now. It's a fantastic place to be. I think the spring and summer is showcases its best parts, although I still do love the winter. So you're in tonight to discuss a little bit about, I guess it's a new project or the culmination of a new project, which is an autobiography,
Yeah.
Banjo Man, which you have a long and storied history, especially in the realms of folk music. So first of all, tell me why now? Why was the moment to kind of write your life story this period of time?
Well, I think that I had written a book before called "The Road Is My Mistress," and I never quite felt that it told the full story. It really stopped way before some of the seeds that I had planted had really sprang into something important, and also my mentors all passed away. The people that I learned from were gone. And I felt the need to tell the story for those people who would never have that chance to be around them, that I could share some of the insights of what it was like to be around with Pete Seeger in a very kind of informal way over at his house. And what was he really like? What was Utah Phillips really like? And Jimmy Driftwood and some of the old musicians that I met, like Sis Cunningham. And, Tom, I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was to have spent so much time with some of these people and how they affected my life. And because Pete Seeger came into my life when I was really 19 years old, I had a long history with Pete. And the book really spans that history because the book ends with a celebration of Pete's life that we did over at Lincoln Center. That was, playing at Lincoln Center was just, that was like as good as it gets, Tom. You had Judy Collins over here, and you had, Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary over there, and Dar Williams, and just everybody was there. But, that was the reason that I chose to end in that time was because it brought everything back together from this idea of this youthful kid who was searching for something. He wanted to be a musician, and he really had no roadmap to get there. And at the end of it, you see everything that kind of developed along the way.
Yeah, let's kind of bring it back to some of that childhood stuff because I flicked through the autobiography, and it was you really kind of span the whole distance, and there was definitely some parts at least in the beginning that were quite interesting, and especially in your formative years, some of those events when you're living in a commune, you're a greaser at one point with a switchblade, which is a far cry from what you are now. It's difficult to think of you in a leather jacket.
The whole thing, Tom, is that I think that we have to understand that young people have to try on different ideas, like who are you and who you're not, and hopefully as a young person you find out quickly when you put on that persona, hey, that's not me at all. And so I was searching for, who am I anyway? And so I went through a lot of things, and when I think back on it, sometimes there is, Tom. This is really kind of interesting. In Japan, they have this philosophy that if you have a pot, a beloved pot, and the pot falls down and breaks, that you don't throw it away, that you take it and you put it back together and you fill the crack with gold. And it makes the faults more beautiful than the pot had ever been. So sometimes in your life, when you have these little breaks and faults, that they are part of who you are. And you have to learn how to embrace them. Not to say that everything that we do in life is good. We make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And so I felt that when I was writing the book, that I had to be honest with people. You don't want people to think that, oh, yeah, everything was great. No, it wasn't great. I came from a really difficult family. My father was abusive. I went through a lot of difficulties with him. So I basically was a latchkey child and grew up on my own. And I was searching for something, and the thing that I was searching for was music. And then I was trying to figure out, well, how can I play this music? I don't know. I didn't have a roadmap. Nobody was giving me any ideas about these things, and I'm trying to figure it out myself. And it wasn't until when I was in high school that I stumbled on Pete Seeger. And I was in a rock and roll band. I was loading their equipment. I was the equipment boy, getting paid in hamburgers, and the band manager played guitar, and I told him I was hearing the sound of a banjo in my head. Now that's the weird thing, Tom. I don't know how that happened or why that happened, but I was hearing the sound of a banjo in my head, and I told him about it, and, well, he told me about this guy that would come on Sesame Street, big, tall guy with a banjo. And so I would go and watch Sesame Street early in the morning with my young sister, Lisa. She'd tell me, oh, Pete Seeger's on TV. So I would go and I'd watch him, and there was something magical about him that when he came to Douglas College, to a little chapel. I was in high school, and I skipped out that day. It was one of those smart decisions that I had. And Pete was playing over in the little chapel, and everybody had really long hair at that time, and so did I. So I slipped right through. Nobody questioned me, and I watched the concert, and he's there playing. Tom, he's playing. And there was something about the way that he reached out and everyone sang along that filled my body with light. My body started filling up with this bright light. And that was the beginning of this big change that was inside of me. I said, this is what I want to do with my life. This is it. And I got to say hello to Pete backstage. I asked him why he liked the banjo, and he smiled at me. He said, "'Cause I like the tone." That meant the world to me, that he talked to me. And then I started really learning how to, I got his book and started learning how to play. And I got this. Maybe you want to hear a little story about the banjo here. And I got the banjo right over here.
The same banjo from when you were a kid, or?
No, this one is a different one, but. So I was trying to learn how to play, and I got the Pete Seeger book, and I finally did save up all my lunch money. I was on strike. I was not eating, because you're a young kid. Where do you get money? Lunch money. So I was not eating. My mother didn't know. I saved up all my money, and I got a banjo, and then I was learning how to play the banjo through this book. And I was learning how to play the banjo through this book. And I was trying to figure out any way that I could about learning new things. And so I heard that there was this place down in the Pine Barrens, New Jersey, down at the bottom of New Jersey, kind of really unusual place. And so I convinced a friend of mine that he could play mandolin. And he got himself a mandolin. And together we went hitchhiking. And we were going to Albert's cabin. I didn't know what it was. I just heard the name. I heard Albert's cabin. We went down going down into Mount Holly. There was a little music store there. And, I'm talking. I'm saying, we're going to go down to Albert's cabin. Well, the guy who was there, he says, well, I'm going to go down to Albert's cabin tonight. Do you want to come with me? And I'm saying, yeah, well, that sounds great. Yeah. So we climb into his car after we close up the shop, and we're driving down the road, and he gets onto the New Jersey Turnpike, and he's going south, and all of a sudden, he makes a quick turn and starts going the wrong way on the other side of the highway. So, we're going south. He goes into the north lane, but he's still going south, and then he goes into the woods. Now, I'm saying, who is this guy anyway? I just met him. I mean, I don't have any idea who it is. So here we are, these young teenage kids, and we're starting to have all these kind of crazy ideas, like maybe, who knows, maybe this guy's like an axe murderer or something. And we're sitting there, and we're driving through this, these dirt paths, and there's these abandoned kind of bunch of washing machines and all kinds of refrigerators. And there was this tree that had this mirror in it. And when we were driving, it shot back the lights. And I felt like I was in a horror film. And we were getting really, really scared. And then we heard the sound of music, fiddles, banjos. And he goes, here we are, boys. We pull in. And there's Albert's cabin, an old hunting cabin out in the pines. And there on the front porch is a young kid, about my age, and an old man, when they both have banjos. So I take out my banjo, and I play a little bit. And we're playing Cripple Creek, a couple of things. And then the old man, he goes, well, we're going to play all the old Joe Clark. You know that one? And I said, no, I don't know that one. And he goes, well, my name is Sam Hunt. I've been living here over in the Pine Barrens all my life. I've been playing banjos. I make banjos. I make old Barnegat snake box boats. I do everything. I travel all over and make these. And this guy talked fast and furious. I mean, he was talking so fast, I could hardly understand him. And then he goes, so you don't know that old Joe Clark? Well, why don't we learn it right now? And he looked at me and said, well, you take your finger and you put it on the second string like that. Can you do that? And I went, good. He said, now put one finger behind the other on the first string and pluck it off. Can you do that? I said, all right. He said, put them together. He said, now hit it open. Now fret the second string. Now hit it open. He goes, that's it. And before you know it, so that's how I learned the old Joe Clark from old Sam Hunt. So everywhere that I went, Tom, I would be learning from anybody that I could learn from. And it was a while until, that moment when I did actually, get to meet Pete. And I was 19 at that time, 19 years old. And he was playing a concert over in Central Park. And Arlo Guthrie was playing there. Now, my sister, Lisa, remember her, who woke me up when he came on Sesame Street? She was in New York City with my mom, and they were looking at museums with my younger sister, Tina. and they saw all these people putting out blankets. And Lisa says, "What's going on?" "Oh, Pete Seeger or Arlo Guthrie are playing today." Well, somehow my sister got the idea that, oh, Rick and Pete, they're close friends, I bet you he's backstage right now. So she went over to the guy who was watching the gate and she said, "My brother's with Pete Seeger. Can you take me there?" And the guard did. He took Tina and Lisa, and they went back and they met with Pete, and they were telling him about me and God knows what. I didn't know anything about it. I went to the concert that night, and it was a fantastic concert. And near the end, Pete says, "Well, we're going to have a big festival tomorrow. Hoboken, New Jersey. Benefit for the Clearwater. Everybody's welcome." I was excited. I said, "I'm going to go to that." It wasn't that far. So I get up the next morning, I put my banjo on my back. I'm going to go out the door. And Lisa looks at me and she says, "Did you know that Pete Seeger files his nails?" I said, "What?" I had no idea of what took place. I got over to Hoboken, and I joined with a few people. There were some young people like myself who were sitting around playing guitar. Well, who comes walking over but Pete? He opens up his guitar case, puts his big 12 string on. He comes over and he starts playing with us, and I'm like, "What's going on here? I can't believe this, And then the music stops, and he looks at me and he goes, "I haven't seen you before. Who are you?" I was petrified. I said, "I'm Rik Palieri." And he smiled. He goes, "Rick, I met your sisters yesterday. They told me you were a good banjo player. Why don't you come up on stage and we'll play a couple songs together?" And he took me up on stage, Tom, and my life changed from that moment on.
Wow. Quite a story, and thank God for your sisters, hey? And their belief that you and Pete were very good friends worked out well in the end. You mentioned the Clearwater just then, and obviously we know that you were on that boat. I would love to hear kind of that story, how that started, but just quickly, what was it about sailing down the Hudson with the boat? And you mentioned in the book that Pete liked sailing before. He had a bit of a dinghy before the sloop. What was it about sailing that really called to Pete, and how does that tie in with folk music and the atmosphere and the culture of folk?
It was in the late 1960s that Pete he would call it a bathtub of a boat, and he was trying to sail. His wife Toshi knew how to sail, so they were sailing this little boat, and Pete had this idea. Well, it would be really great if we could get a really nice boat to sail in the Hudson, but the Hudson's polluted, and we could use this sailboat, and we could tell people about how if we cleaned up the Hudson, that everybody could be sailing on the Hudson, and then we could be swimming in the Hudson. Well, everybody thought he was out of his mind, but he starts getting people together. He read this book about sloops on the Hudson. And another young player named Vic Swartz, he handed them that book, and he said, "Maybe we can raise money for this boat that you're thinking about." And they started doing little concerts, tiny little concerts, and they started raising more and more money, so that in 1969, I believe it was in May, they launched the sloop Clearwater out of Maine. And the thing about the Clearwater on that maiden voyage, it was Pete and all musicians with a couple of people who really knew how to sail. But most of them were musicians. Don McLean was on there. Gordon Bach was on there. Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who did know how to sail, Gordon Bach. And so they went down the Hudson River, and they did concerts all along the way. And that was really the beginning of how he brought that message and brought people to the river, and exactly what he was hoping for started happening. People were looking at the river and saying, this river really needs to be cleaned up if we're going to sail in it. And before you know it, the group got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's still going on over 50 years later. And they have a big. I'll be playing at the Clearwater Revival. It's virtual this year, but I'll be playing there. And I think it's June 19th. It's coming up.
Yeah, I've actually got a friend that I think a couple of seasons ago was on the sloop. And So yeah, tell us a little bit about your experience on the boat.
Well, I mean, I was here. I didn't know much about, I was getting interested in the boat because of Pete, of course, and I joined the organization when I was still in high school, and I thought that you had to know a lot of stuff. So I took, a Coast Guard boating course after school. So here was all these guys decked out in these white captain's hat with these white shoes. They all, and here's this, guy with real long hair and trying to learn about sailing. And I didn't understand that they taught you everything that you needed to know. But Pete when we got to kind of form this kind of relationship. He would call me up, and he wanted me to organize a festival down in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And so he couldn't come that time, but we had Harry Chapin and Bob McGrath from Sesame Street. It was a fantastic festival. We brought about 1,000 people down to the Perth Amboy Harbor, and it was really great. And afterwards, Bob McGrath said, "Rick, why don't you come out on the sloop Clearwater, and you can back me up. I'll sing and you can play your banjo." So that was the first time I went sailing on the Clearwater. And right after that, and the amazing thing, Tom, was here we are, get on the boat, and the boat starts sailing, not sailing, but kind of motoring out just a little ways, and then everybody get on deck. Form two lines. Everybody has the ropes, and we start pulling up the sail. And one of the guys was singing, "In South Australia I was born, heave away, haul away, South Australia round Cape Horn, bound for South Australia." And everybody's pulling on the rope. "Come on, all you roving kings, to me heave away, to me haul away. Come on, all, let's hear you sing, bound for South Australia." It was like a magical trip. All of a sudden, people are singing and the sails are going up and we're sailing down. And after the sail, we're getting off the boat and they said, "Rick, can you stay with us for a while? We have a bunch of festivals to do. And it'd be really great if you just stayed on." So I stayed on for a couple of weeks and did all kinds of concerts. And then ever since then, we would have these big pumpkin sails where we would load pumpkins on the boat and do concerts up and down the Hudson River. And it was a really special time.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. Well, we'd love to hear another song. So what have you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I brought along the Native American flute.
Oh, nice.
And I wanted to introduce this next piece with this. There's so much in this book, as you can tell. It's 530 pages. So, folks, there's a lot of skipping around that we're doing right now to get to this point, where I was out in the Native American reservation, out in the Standing Rock Reservation, and I met with Kevin Locke, one of the great flute players, and that's how I learned how to play the flute. And Well, I was doing all these school tours on all these reservations, and I really, I was meeting with a lot of Native Americans, and I really wanted to learn about some storytelling. So I was trying to listen to how people were telling stories, and then I got back home here, and I realized one of the best storytellers was right here in Vermont. His name was Wolfsong. And Wolfsong and I became friends, and we started talking, and he said, he goes, I'll tell you what, I'll teach you how to tell some stories if you teach me how to play that flute like Kevin taught you. So we became friends. We got together and played the flute, told stories together. But, Wolfsong didn't last as long as we would have liked, and passed away way before his time. And I can remember, they had a big celebration when Wolfsong passed away. Went out to Snake Mountain. They scattered his ashes there. And I was thinking about, that I should honor my friend in a traditional way and write a song about him. So I went out to Snake Mountain, and I looked up into the mountain, and there's that little part where there's a clearing, and I started thinking about him. And I remembered when he would tell a story, he always wanted you to participate. So he would say, hey. And he said, if you're listening, you reply, ho. Try that. When, hey, ho. So he would always get the audience, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho. On Snake Mountain, in the Vermont hills, high above the rocks and rills, after midnight, when the moon's in spring, you can hear the wolf song sing. Hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, he was a man. He walked this land, and he came from Abenaki clan. He shared his stories, he shared his soul, reaching out to young and old. Hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, he held the legends, he kept the lore, and was welcome at every door. He heard the calling of the loon, then he left with the daughter of the moon. No, no, no. Hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, hey, ah, 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 hey. Oh, now his journey in this world is through, but he still lives in me and you. Like Usagabi and all his friends, now his story will never end. No, no, no. Hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, we remember. Hey, ah, hey, ah, hey. Oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh, we remember. Hey, ah, hey, ah, hey. Oh.
Rik Palieri honouring another Vermont storyteller there. So yeah, we're going to skip forward a little bit because we've got to be conscious on time. So you did a lot post Clearwater, post Pete Seeger. I guess nothing was ever post Pete Seeger really, but you visited Poland on a number of occasions. Once getting chucked out because they thought you might be a spy. also did a ton of touring across the country, and even internationally, Australia, Germany, met some cowboys out in the West. Everything. If you could pick out just one really kind of bright spark of a story in your time post Clearwater, what would you kind of fixate on in terms of being a formative experience that kind of ended up shaping you in the person you are today?
Oh, there's just there's so many, because wherever you go, Tom, you meet up with these different characters, and everyone teaches you something. Now, I can remember out in Timbo, Arkansas, and when I met up with Jimmy Driftwood. Now, Jimmy Driftwood is not a household name, but you know his song, The Battle of New Orleans, because of Johnny Horton. And I was out in Timbo doing the school tour, and I was sitting around playing with a bunch of people, and this one guy comes and he goes, Jimmy would like you. I said, Jimmy? He goes, yeah, Jimmy would like you. He goes, where are you staying anyway? And I said, well, I'm sleeping over in my camper with my dog over here. He said, well, you can't stay here in town, He goes, you can follow me. So I followed him, and I went, about 7 miles to this little town called Timbo. And it was a school there. He says, well, you park right over here in this school. And he says, and then you get up in the morning and go have breakfast with Jimmy. He lives right over there. And I didn't believe him. I thought he was pulling my leg. And I went to sleep. I looked at my dog, Koza at the time. I said, Koza, yeah, we're going to have breakfast with Jimmy Driftwood, I went to sleep, and then early in the morning, somebody's knocking on my window. I look over, there's a guy in a red shirt and a black hat. He goes, howdy, my name's Jimmy Driftwood. Breakfast is on the table. Come on in. So I walked in, and there's Jimmy Driftwood. And he's got all these instruments, and he puts his grandfather's guitar in my hand, and he starts telling stories. He's taking out his Grammy. He goes, well, I got two of those Grammys. He said, I'm glad I got two. I can use them for door stops. I got one for the front and one for the back. Well, this was unbelievable. And every time that I'd visit with Jimmy, we would sit and he would tell stories over and over again. And, Tom, one of my favorite stories was this one I'm going to share with you. He goes, it was back in around 1958. I was traveling all over the world back then, I got invited over there to England to play at a country western club. Now, when I got there, I saw all the men, they had on cowboy hats, and they had holsters with guns. Now, I'm from the Ozarks, and we're used to carrying around guns. We don't bring them into the auditorium. But I figure it's a different country. They might have different customs. You never know. So I got near the end of my program, and I says, well, now I'm going to sing you my famous song, The Battle of New Orleans. This big guy stands up and goes, well, what do you think we paid you to come here for, Jimmy? He said, I didn't hesitate. Well, in 1814, we took a little trip along Colonel Jackson down to mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we fought the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. Now, when I got to that chorus, well, they fired their guns. Guess what? They reached in their holsters, pulled out their revolvers. Boom, 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 firing their guns. Every time I said fire their guns, they fired their guns. When I got done with the song, you couldn't see the back of the room for all the gun smoke. We're in 1814, we took a little trip along Colonel Jackson down to mighty Mississippi. Took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we fought the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. Fired our guns and the British kept coming. Wasn't quite as many as there was a while ago. Fired once more and they began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, they ran through the briar and they ran through the bramble, ran through the bushes and ran go. Ran so fast that the hounds couldn't catch them. Down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Old Jimmy Driftwood. Now, Tom, when you experience somebody like that, you're not going to forget it. So it was Jimmy who said, now, Rick, you can't go around wearing no cheap hats. He goes, you gotta at least get a good Stetson hat. He gave me a special number to go down and get us a good hat. You got to wear good shirts. You can't wear. That's the whole thing is that if you're going to be a performer, look like a performer. I heard this from so many of the old timers. My friend Utah Phillips, I was interviewing him and I said, Utah, what's the most important thing for a young performer to know? He said, 2 shirts. I said, what do you mean 2 shirts? I'm asking you a serious question. I'm telling you a serious question. I'm answering that question. 2 shirts. You need 2 shirts. He said, you're going to go to a gig. You're going to be wearing a black shirt. They're going to have a black curtain. You're going to disappear. Next day, you're going to wear a red shirt. I'll have a red curtain. You're going to disappear. You got to carry 2 shirts, Rick. I'm telling you, got to wear it. I didn't believe him, Tom. The next month, I wore the wrong shirt for almost every show. I was interviewing Sarah Lee Guthrie. I had a red shirt. There was a red curtain behind me. The only thing, and I was disappearing, really. It was terrible. I could see it in the video camera. And as I squeezed into behind the black speaker. So she's sitting there and I'm sitting behind this black speaker. Oh gosh, it was crazy. But doing the TV show, The Songwriter's Notebook, that I started in 1999, that's what really brought all of these people into my life. That, when you're doing a TV show, even if it's a little community show, once that red light is on, you are with that person. You are with one mind, And so, I would be with, Tom Paxton and Pete and all these people that I never really thought about would want to do my show. Everybody wanted to do the show. So, that's been 20 some years. And what happened was in 2009, the Library of Congress contacted me and said, we want to see what you've done. And they saw some of the interviews, and now there's the Rik Palieri collection at the Library of Congress, American Folklife Center. We have 364 different types of interviews, and some of them are studio interviews, but many of them are not. I went with the hobos, and I went and climbed in the boxcars with the king of the hobos. And all those guys, the hobos, they're all gone now. All the people that I interviewed, but they live on in the Library of Congress. They'll live. That was the cool thing, Tom. When I signed the contract with the Library of Congress, it said that you're donating your work to the future people of the United States of America, and that was a heavy moment. It was like you knew that long after you're gone, that this is what was going to remain. Was all of this work, and not just for you, but for everybody, for Rachel Bissix, for Chin Ho, who was on my show. I mean, for Jim Lockridge, who was on my show. Really, all of these people are now preserved in our national archives in the Library of Congress, and that gives me a lot of pride because it feels like, well, I think you did something there, kid.
Well, it's as much as it pains me to say it, we're going to have to wrap it up, but I feel that you've given us tonight just a small snippet of what you could expect from this marvelous book of yours. And it's called Banjo Man. How do you get it, Rick? If people are interested in hearing the whole story, how do you find this?
Just go to my website, and you could see right there, you'll find out about Banjo Man. It was one of those choices that you have. Because my last book I had on Amazon, and I decided, I don't want this to be like Amazon. I want this to be like an old-fashioned kind of thing. I want to sign the books. I want to send them to people. My wife makes a little bookbind, a little bookmark from our hand bindery, and it's real. It's something real. It's not something you buy from the store. Now, do we have time for another song or what?
Go on, yeah. We've always got time for one more song with you, Rick. Go on.
Short. Because we're talking about Rachel Bissix, and we had a really cool thing with. There was a big songwriting kind of event that happened in memory of Rachel, and people from all over wrote songs, and it was a really wonderful demonstration about how important Rachel Bissix was to all of us. And she was a good pal of mine. And so I had not written a song in a while, and I wrote this little about this pandemic. We'll gather together, gather together, we'll gather together as the virus leaves this land. We'll gather together, gather together, gather together as the virus leaves this land. Been so long since I felt your face. It's been so long since I felt your grace. But we'll all dance together. We'll all dance together. We'll all dance together as the virus leaves this land. We'll all dance together. We'll all dance together. We'll all dance together as the virus leaves this land. And that's what I'm hoping, folks. I hope that everybody out there is going to get vaccinated so that we can all be together, we can sing together, we can dance together, and more people can come right here in the studio and be a part of this wonderful broadcast that has been going on for so long, and be a part of the Big Heavy World community, because it's important what Jim and all the people here at Big Heavy World have been doing for so long. You know, it's Tom, it's really unusual for someone who doesn't play music, who is not somebody who's an actual musician, to put so much time and energy and love in helping the musical community. And that's what Jim Lockridge has done for so long, ever since I've known him. Back when he had really long hair down to down to the middle of his back. He's been here, and he's going to stay here. And I thank you, Jim Lockridge, for all the things that you do. And Tom, I thank you for all the good work that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much, Rik, for coming on and telling us so many of those great stories again. We always love having you in. Such a musical talent, but I think your real talent lies in telling those stories. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that is all we got time for tonight. You can join us next week. We're going to have Abby BK in the studio, and she's going to be really great. So definitely tune in for that one. This has been WOMM LP, operating out of Burlington, 105.9 The Radiator. It's been The Rocket Shop. Good night.